So I want to welcome everybody to this particular discussion as we discuss issues around where we are in our current culture, especially with racism. And so one of the things that we wanted to bring back around and talk about and have a discussion back and forth is the discussion on the place of monuments. Because since the murder of George Floyd, there has been this resurgence on taking down Confederate monuments, and which led to other things that have been happening. And so Pastor Jackson had brought that up and as a discussion point, and I have really wanted to have that as I was raised in Kansas, which where I was 30 minutes from Lawrence, Kansas, which pre-Civil War was a hotbed of activity between pro-slavery and anti-slavery, and so I grew up in that area, not that era. Sorry, I'm not that old, but I grew up in Kansas. I've lived in Minnesota the last 20 years. So having a discussion in regards specifically to Confederate monuments is something I've wanted to learn more about and hear from people on their thoughts of what all of this means. So I'm just going to throw out a couple of questions and just try to get some responses. I know everybody here is fully capable of being respectful. I am a person that doesn't mind hearing different points of view, and I will be honest, if I don't hear enough of an opposite point of view, I am an excellent debater, and I know how to bring up the other side. So I can play devil's advocate as well. So, but I'm hoping for just some good discussion on this. So just first question is more of a gut check or how things are hitting you. Just what are your thoughts currently in what's going on with some of these tearing down of Confederate monuments? What do you think of that generally? And again, very respectful conversation. So for it, against it, it's okay. Let's just have the discussion. Anybody jump in?
Well, I've been reading a lot lately on I know about slavery, but I've been reading a lot of books. I got some books when I visited Frederick Douglass's house. I got some of his books when I visited there a few years back.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it back out and I read it again. And here's what I think we as whites don't think about. We don't think about all these things that happened then, but it's still kind of going on today.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see where all of this would bother them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, if they have to see this every day. I mean, we should not have those things that bring back such memories. And people always say, why don't they forget? Why don't they forget? Because it's still, in my opinion, it's still going on today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good.
And I would like to say with Matt there, our Constitution has a lot of bad things in it that should be out of it. The Alabama.
Can you mail him a list?
One time I had it. I really worked on that years ago trying to get the Constitution changed, but it's taken out a few things already.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. So somebody else, just your first gut level check. Nancy?
Yeah. For me, it's complicated in the sense that I almost think it should be looked at from each individual situation. Like, I would love to know what John Lewis's family thinks about the renaming of the bridge, in the sense that I have two monuments I wanted to talk about, which I think are very different in the sense that nobody in this earth, or very few people, know who Edmund Pettus is. I have no idea who he is. I mean,
True.
I know he was like in a Confederate thing, but everyone all around the world knows what Edmund Pettus Bridge stood for and what happened there. And I thought it was interesting. I listened to his entire funeral, which was quite wonderful.
Yeah.
And of course, the politicians there, who are wonderful also, but they're also good, skilled politicians, both President Obama and President Clinton, made a point of talking about the bridge. They never gave it a name because it's controversial now. And I just want that to be like, I'd like to know what their family thinks about it. And if that, I would want to take my cue from what they would want. Certainly, you know, the man and his life and his soul and his legacy needs to be incredibly honored. I just don't want to take away the fact that it's so known all around the world. I mean, it's one of the very few sites in America that is up for like a UNESCO designation. And people know what that name means. They know what it stood for. They know what happened there. And I want that legacy to be continued. And is it better to be continued under John Lewis's name? I'm not saying, I don't know. And the other one that is a good example to me of that all of them need to be like, now you take something like Richmond, where you've got that incredible whole row of things, which is horrible, like to me, you know, the whole row of honoring traitors, you know, to the country. So, but then you take like
Nancy, from my hometown.
What was that, Clyde?
I know, I'm stepping on your territory, Clyde.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's home
so,
for Clyde. Yeah.
I want to hear what your thoughts are. But the monument in Washington, D.C., with Lincoln and the memorial to the Emancipation Proclamation, that was paid for. My understanding, which is limited, was paid for by former slaves, paid for. And so if it's something that somebody with hard-earned money paid for, maybe it can be reworked and redone within on something else. So I don't think, I think just like the whole issue of trying to treat every single person with dignity and us trying to be better people and trying to follow Christ's message, you know, I don't think you can just kind of say this blanket, you know, thing. You know, there's people's lives and what it means to them, and I can't say what it might mean to the family of someone who donated. Maybe that family wants it gone. I just would like to talk to the people who have much more stake in what we're talking about and hear those voices that are closer to situations than I am. You know?
Good.
Certainly not in honor of not in favor in any way of honoring oppression or honoring traitors or honoring that, but I think it's complicated.
Right, yeah, good. Somebody else, just some gut checks about, yeah, go ahead, Clyde.
I think your question was more towards the tearing down of, I mean, I don't know if I agree with the actual tearing down, but you know, when people get to a certain point, the frustration boils over and things like that happen. And I've started studying more, you know, talk about my home and Richmond, and you know, as a young person going to school, I never even thought about Monument Avenue and what it represented, to be honest with you. I mean, growing up, I didn't think about it, you know, and as I've gotten older and I've learned more about history, learned more about slavery and what's going on, I see where the frustration is. I mean, I understand how they're, you know, why they're so frustrated. I've learned a lot about monuments and studying here recently. And I've also learned that, you know, a lot of General Robert E. Lee, who's, you know, he's a lot of these monuments. He didn't want monuments, you know, he was dead set against Confederate monument. So,
Mhm.
so the man himself said, "No,
Yeah.
we should not do this." But as soon, when he died, they started putting up monuments. So, if you study it and learn about it, but if you look at monuments and you look at the Confederate monuments, what are they celebrating? All right, they're celebrating. Nancy said, traitors. They're celebrating people who wanted to succeed from the United States of America. Right.
Right.
And as a military person, to have 10 of our military bases named after Confederate generals,
Yeah.
which I didn't even think about, when I was in the military,
Right.
is I listened to a guy the other day. He said, I don't know if you all know who Nancy Kerrigan is, right? He said, naming your military bases after Confederate generals is like Nancy Kerrigan naming her child Tanya
Harding.
Yeah.
I mean, they were your enemy, right?
Yeah.
But you name your military bases. So we have to know the history. We have to understand. I think there's a place for all monuments. I think, Nancy talked about, destroying it. We probably shouldn't destroy. And like I said, your question going back to is turn them down. I think there's a place for them. I think for us as Black people, if we truly understand, why they're there, and what the Civil War was about. Some people say, well, the Civil War was about, it wasn't about slavery. Yes, it was. It was about, it was about slavery. Some people say, well, it was it was about states' rights. Yeah, it was about the Southern states' rights, right? They didn't like the Northern states' rights because they wanted the right to continue to have slaves. So yeah, it was about the Southern states' rights. It wasn't about all states' rights, right? So we have to really, really understand that, and those frustrations kind of boil over. And Matt, now we talked a little bit about a couple of weeks ago, moving monuments or changing holidays or it's just scratching the surface, basically.
Sure.
But there's
Right.
but when you do those things, you show people that you're serious about making change. You're serious about trying to put in the effort to make changes. So when you talk about taking the Dr. King holiday and separating it from Robert E. Lee Day, like we do that, like we have in the state of Alabama. So
Yeah.
it's just scratching the surface. But when you take those actions, you are showing that you are serious about making change. You're serious about race relations. When you celebrate the Confederate general that killed your ancestors, for Black people, you see the celebration of these Confederates. You see the celebration of the KKK leaders, and the big celebrations or whatever. Well, how do you think that makes us feel as Black people? I know Pastor Jackson and I, we're certainly minority on this call this evening. But how do you, if you think about it, how do you think that it makes us feel to celebrate the people who if they still were in power, we would be enslaved right now? You know what I'm saying? So,
Right.
I might be working in the house. I'm kind of light, so
Right.
we would be enslaved right now. But we want to celebrate these people. So I know I said a lot, but
That's good.
I just want us to kind of think about those things.
Yeah. Pastor Jackson, what just your initial thoughts?
I'm really sitting in now trying to absorb as much being the sponge before I really start talking. So that's where I'm in the sponge mode right now. But I like what I'm hearing as far as us. We really have to really be honest with one another. And we say we're one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and freedom for all. We're lying. we might as well just be real. It's a lie. We're not truly one nation.
Yeah.
That serve the Almighty truth. Because if we were, we would look to Him for wisdom, for leadership, for guidance, for fairness and equality for all people, for all
Mm-hmm.
people, and not just one race of people or one ethnicity. And the country, that's what the country is really built up off of, was slavery, segregation, separation. And if we're going to move, I do believe with all my heart that we are in the timing of God to move the country to what he wants it to be.
Yeah.
And, I looked at Israel spending 400 years in Egypt, 40 years in the wilderness. And I think we're 401 years now
Yeah.
as a nation. So when you look at the
Since
timing,
the first slaves arrived, yeah.
Yeah, since the first slaves, right? You look at the timing of it. It is now time for us truly to be free, to truly be a part of the Americas. And it takes a lot of prayer, a lot of wisdom, a lot of guidance to move there. And I must echo what Clyde said. I don't, if you all put yourselves in our shoes for a moment, if someone was to hypothetically speaking, metaphorically speaking, to break in, take my family, abuse, rape, separate them from me. I don't want a statue of them on my yard.
Yeah.
I don't need to be, it's still here. So I don't need to be reminded of what was done. And then I think from the other side, it's like it's still, the monuments are there for a sense of superiority. You need to remember, we owned you all at one time. We still can hold you down. We still run things. And so from our mindset, that's what we see. That's what it reminds us of. And you can't separate the flag and say it's just a flag of our heritage. Your heritage goes back, the history goes back to your ancestors enslaving our people.
Right.
And so we really have to be real and honest with one another and accept that fact. And it doesn't, if you take the monument down or if you change the name of the bases, it does not change history.
Right.
So you can't use that as an argument. It's going to change history. No. You look in the history books and it's not there.
Yeah.
But it did still happen. And so, you can't go back and change that, but at least we could change and work for the betterment of the country. And I must say, I know we try not to go too political, but not for the benefit of a party.
Right.
The people, all of the people. And I think, Clyde, you was there when I was preaching a couple of Sundays ago, and I made the statement of, I wish it was set up like it was in middle school and high school. And you just voted for the person that you felt was going to do what they said they was going to do. Quick example: I'm going to put snacks in the snack machine.
Yeah,
I'm going to give cookie sticks to everybody. We're going to have a hour and a half be able to just take a nap.
Yeah.
And you said, okay, that person, I believe that's who I want to vote for.
That's exactly right.
Because believe it or not, the parties bring about division as well as the ethnicities of the people that live in the country.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
and going back real quick, and I'll be quiet. I was trying to hold off from stop talking. But I've never seen anyone that lost being celebrated.
Yeah.
Speak to some of that.
Yeah. You've never seen, the loser of the championship game.
Right. You go to University of Alabama, it's a statue of Bear Bryant and Saban out there.
Yeah. They don't put the guy before Bear Bryant out there.
So help me to understand what's.
You lose. Here's your consolation prize: a statue.
Could I speak to some of that?
Absolutely. Jump right in.
I'm certainly a daughter of the South. My family came into Alabama in 1816. before Alabama was a state.
Before Alabama was a state, yeah.
And so I'm thoroughly a daughter of the South and have lived here all of my life. And I think a lot of what I see, and from just my own family history and what I've read and what the stories that are told down through generations in Southern families and white Southern families, I think what I hear more than anything is this whole idea. We were just talking about the losers aren't celebrated. And I think this is a lot of what happened after the Civil War in the South, that the South was the loser.
Mm.
And the South took on a real victim mentality, and Reconstruction was very difficult for the South, for white and Black people, for all kinds of reasons. And I think a lot of what happened was that the white Southerners grabbed hold of this idea of we have to hold on to this kind of glorified, nostalgic, romanticized idea of who we were and what our culture was, and glorified it, made it something honorable, and kind of pushed aside the reality of what slavery was and what it meant for the people that had been enslaved. And I think that their way of overcoming the effects of Reconstruction and kind of getting their power back, which they did through the Alabama Constitution for one thing, is that they did that you get the Jim Crow laws, and all of this happened since that and until now has been a way for the South to say, we will not be the victim. We are going to punish these Black people. We are going to continue to punish these Black people. We have to be on top. White people, we're going to make ourselves we want the power. We're going to get the power. And by holding and oppressing another group of people, we prove we have it. And I think that's a lot of what we're dealing with. I think it's what we're dealing with white supremacy, and all of this is this need to separate ourselves out and somehow be the ones in power, the ones in control. And without being very self-aware of certainly what that means in terms of our Christian faith and how wrong-headed all of this is. And certainly many of the Confederate statues were erected during the time of Jim Crow. They were erected as a symbol of our supremacy. And that's why I think they need to be taken down. They were not erected, well, the South didn't have the money to erect anything for a long time, but by the time they did, all this other Jim Crow had arisen, and they are celebrated. And it's a way of saying and putting out there in the public view this whole romanticized, glorified idea of this lost old South and this culture that we were denied because we lost the war. And that's why I think they need to be taken down, because that's what they symbolize. And they are a stark reminder to not only the African-American community, but to everyone about what we're saying by having them out there in the public forum. And so along with the Confederate flag, I think these Confederate statues need to come down. I think these American bases need to be renamed. At the same time that I'm saying all of that, I do have a word of caution about all of this. At some point, we have to decide where this stops. Because now I'm hearing, if George Washington owned slaves, we can no longer honor George Washington. Well, at some point, everybody has got something in their history that would keep them from being celebrated. Take, for example, just move it away from racism for a moment. Take it to the Me Too movement and the whole thing about men being sexual predators and what they have done to women. So we can talk about a lot of people that we want to be held accountable for what they've done to women. But at the same time, if we go back through history, are we going to take away all the celebrations of anybody who's ever participated in that even when they've done a lot of other good things in their lives. I don't know how you,
Not,
I don't know how you draw the line.
no, that's
We
a
are
good
all
word.
sinful.
Yeah, that's a good word. There is caution. There are questions
You know,
to
we're
ask.
all sinful. We have all fallen short of the glory of God, some more egregiously than others in the public forum. But how do you divide out and say, you know, this person's life, because this was there, then nothing else that they did mattered? I don't know how you differentiate that. How do you tease that out? And I think that while I don't have any problem dealing with the Confederate monuments and the flag and all of that, but at some point, where do we stop?
Right. Yeah. That's a great question. And let me ask this for all of you, and Judith, you being your family so rooted in Alabama and in the South, because one of the questions that I've had out of all of this is, what are we supposed to do if our ancestors fought on both sides, you know, in the Civil War? Are we to dishonor them or just quit remembering them? You know, how do you handle that? It's not a Confederate monument, okay, but what do you think of when you think of family if there's the possibility that they fought for the South in the Civil War?
Well, as a privileged white male, I want to respond to both questions. First, about emotionally with the monuments being torn down. And my emotions are that if my colleagues had realized the effects of the suffering that gave us privilege and had removed these signs and had worked toward reconciliation, then monuments wouldn't be torn down. But the fact is, I think the people that are more responsible for the monuments being torn down are people like me. For what we haven't done.
Okay.
And you asked another question. I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, if you had family that goes back generations, even to the Civil War, and you had ancestors that fought for the South in the Civil War, how do you handle that? Are you supposed to just wipe that out, or what do you do?
As a Southern veteran, I served church where there was a Marion Military Institute had a chapel that was the Confederate hospital before the Battle of Selma and was the Union hospital after the Battle of Selma. And these men on both sides were dying in the same space, buried in the same ground. And when the school was reopened, we had a 7-acre cemetery, and we had the soldiers buried, in a sense, side by side, and would have every year a day of remembrance. This veteran remembers how brothers who have fought have a common bond no matter what side they fought on. And there's a respect for one another. And that's what I would say to the families, Daniel. That there's a deep respect for those who have given their ultimate sacrifice for what they were involved with. And anyway, I just want to say I respect veterans.
Sure. Yeah.
Of both sides.
Yeah.
You know, it reminds me of World War II and thinking about German soldiers. You know, certainly we all agree that Germany was wrong-headed in what they did, and Hitler was wrong, and the whole Nazi movement was wrong, and the German people in a lot were certainly complicit in what happened there, in that they allowed it to happen and they went along with it, and they and it was something that arose out of their culture. And yet at the same time, now it's not that we want to put up statues of Hitler or any of his cohorts that did all the awful things they did. But at the same time, the common German soldiers that all fought that war were caught up in something that was larger than themselves, that often they didn't have a lot of choice about. And to some extent, that's true in the South. You had a lot of, as usual in any time of war, you have a lot of young men who are very young and immature and are caught up in something larger than themselves that they grab hold of and they're part of. And a lot of them died. And so I'm with Fletcher in the sense of these were real people. There's somebody's husbands, there's somebody's brothers, there's somebody's sons, there's somebody's spouses and fathers. And I don't have any trouble honoring the memory of individuals that died because they're all children of God. They might have been fighting for not only a lost cause, but a wrong-headed cause. But just back to World War II, so were a lot of the people involved in it. But for individuals that were just a part of that machine, I certainly honor their memory and the fact that they sacrificed so much in being a part of that.
Anybody else on just the thoughts of if family was involved in the Civil War? Yeah, Jerry.
If you lived in Kentucky or North Tennessee or West Virginia, most families did divide.
They did divide, yeah, especially in those areas.
Right, because it was dependent upon who felt which way.
That's, yeah. My house was in Virginia yesterday, and now it's in West Virginia today. So yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah. Here's the other thing that that sometimes I hear: are we erasing history if we get rid of these monuments?
No.
Are we trying to erase history?
No.
And why not? Or why? How are we not erasing history?
Trying to write things now.
Just trying to write things? Yeah, Nancy.
I really wanted to comment on Judith's point, not the one she first made, but a little bit, and then also, but it kind of ties into what you're saying when she was saying, where does it stop?
Yep.
Well, I had this same conversation with my husband a couple of days ago, and I said, well, maybe it stops because we quit glorifying people, period. Like, why should we have statues to anybody? Are we not supposed to be serving a higher cause? And who needs, is it all about our egos? Is it all about who gets a statue no matter what you did or didn't do? So why do we need monuments to a particular person regardless? Like I say, except maybe monuments to, like the cross up there, or something to an event, and quit picking out individual people, which just glorifies a human ego rather than that we're children of God and that we're that. And to me, I mean, I know it's like a pie in the sky thing, but to me, ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, is to erase our own importance, to erase our own me, rather than we are part of the human race, we are part of the children of God, and that's what needs to be celebrated and memorialized, and not an individual's achievement, no matter what they are. And to your point, Dan, right, about that, I don't think it's erasing history, because you can still talk about events. You can still talk about the Battle of blah, 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 or this is where, somebody, John Lewis walked across this bridge and changed the country, galvanized people. So you can talk about events without glorifying a person.
Right, yeah, good. Yeah, somebody else. Just, how are we, Peggy, go ahead.
I have a question about this.
Yes.
If you look at our history books, we actually do not have things in history that we should.
Right. And that may be the bigger problem there, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean,
is not
really
about
a lot of the things that actually happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a retired teacher, so I And I'm not that great with history because I taught 7th grade a lot, but
yeah,
look and things you've read, it's not in our history books.
Yeah, they're neat. Sometimes it's not about we're erasing history. Sometimes we never got the history.
Right.
Yeah, and I love history, and I'm continually finding the things and the stories I didn't know. You know, and from the time periods I loved reading about. You know, so it keeps on going. You know, somebody had mentioned Frederick Douglass, and I read one of the latest biographies on him. It's tremendous, and things that I just didn't know, and the continual learning we have as we try to catch up, you know, from, you know, sometimes bad history.
Right.
So let me ask you this, because it's come up with one of the things that Nancy said. So this is one of the things that I was thinking about as well. What's the place of monuments?
Museums.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, some of these we could put in museums, but what should be the place of monuments? Or just never have them? Well, somebody wrote me, they couldn't be in on this call, and he said, it helps me to realize what the Lord may have had in mind when he said, don't make any graven images.
Yeah.
But is there a place for memorial through a display?
I don't always think of a memorial maybe as a statue of something, but that's just my thought of that.
Yeah.
I think parks and
Well, I'm sorry, Jerry, what was that?
parks and cemeteries and
memorial
museums, and that's about it.
Dan?
Yeah, I was just thinking in the Bible, you're right, you know, there were memorials from time to time built to memorialize what something God did.
Yeah, an event there.
Anything else, you know, I'm just right now I can't think of anything. Like
that's a good point.
Jordan, they crossed over the Jordan, they built a memorial
to
remember to this day, blah blah blah. Yeah, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Well, don't you think those idols were memorials?
Or memorials that turned into idols. You know?
Well,
you know?
Well, there are a lot of them in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think a memorial ordinarily, like right away, is the idol, but it could, like you just said, Dan. I guess it could turn into.
It could turn into one.
But as a former soldier, you know, like the battlefield over here, I mean, the USS Alabama, you know, there are a lot of memorials over there for soldiers and for past battles. You know, I would not want to see those things. Those things are in a great place. I mean, they're there. You can go see. You can pay your respects to those who have sacrificed their life for our country. But I think we're a little off from the Confederate monument talk. To talk about you know, everything else. But to caveat what Judith was saying, I mean, I lived in Germany for 4 years, and you don't walk through the square and see a statue of Hitler in the square. Or you don't.
Any swastikas around that are memorialized?
There are more swastikas in the United States than there are in Germany. Very much so. So you know, and the other point that Judith was making about why those statues were put up, if you look at history, the majority of them were put up between 1900 and 1920.
Yep.
When the Jim Crow laws were instituted, and then there was another spike, 1950 to 1960, when the civil rights movement had increased. There was another spike in monuments, and you can't tell me they weren't put there to intimidate, to say, hey, we're still superior. If you look at the time frame of those monuments, the majority of them were installed. So so we have to look at all those things, and that's why they were
exactly
there.
it. Yeah, that is exactly it. It is that whole point of we can too easily be taken off of an argument by someone saying we're just trying to erase history, or we can't, you know, why do you want to forget Robert E. Lee, or you're just trying to cancel people. It's also looking at the history of why was that put there in the first place, So when did it show up? The why of it showing up. And you get to that motivation that's underneath it. And all of a sudden you're not into this thing because that's my uncle. There's a reason you put those things there. And
well, the statutes of themselves are erasing history. We've already erased the history. We're not telling the whole story. We're only telling a version of the story. And so to the point that Peggy was making about our history and what's being taught in history classes today, that's where we really need to put invest our time and energy and resources is into telling the whole truth about our country and our history, and not these versions of it we get. You would not believe what we were taught in Alabama history when I was growing up. I mean, it was all of this glorified. And I don't know what they're teaching in Alabama history now. I think they've taken out we used to get it in 4th grade and 9th grade. I think they've taken out one of those years. So, and I don't know what they're teaching in the Alabama history now, but I know one thing, what we were taught didn't even begin to cover the truth and what had actually happened here, and certainly around the Civil War. So we've already tried to erase a lot of history. What we need to do is to tell the truth.
Yeah. And I know, go ahead, Pastor Jackson.
I concur with Judith, and thank God for everyone that's on. It's helping me to hear back from you all as much as you probably hearing back from Clyde and myself. But in order for the country to be what I believe the founders hopefully set out for it to be, we've got to be truthful, like you said, Ms. Judith, with the history.
Yep.
We've got to say, look, this is what happened. It happened. We can't go back and change it, but at least we can make it better for the generations behind us. This is something that really should have been done long time ago.
Yeah.
And I need someone to help me to understand, even with the country being built, why there was a need to feel like one race of people was superior than the other, versus, hey, come help us and let us build this country together.
Yeah.
And because that's eventually what ended up happening. It ended up being built off of our ancestors.
Right.
Hard work and
right
out there. And so that's how it ended up building. But it just seems like it's always, I've got to be over you. And then the sad thing is that you find people saying that I'm a Christian.
Careful now, you're stepping on toes.
Something's
Getting right down to it now. Be careful.
Right.
It's not adding up. Because if I'm a Christian and you're a Christian,
right,
regardless of the color of our skin, I see you as my brother or my sister. That's how Christ sees us, and that's how we should see each other. And when you look at it as far as us all being in Christ, there is no superiority. There's no difference between what trying to remember the scripture, between free and master. You say under my umbrella, it's a level playing field.
Yeah.
And if we truly believe that, if we truly hold true to God's holy and divine word, the church should be the ones leading to make a change, to make this country better. We should be out at the forefront, making it a difference and show. And I think with the path to peace that we've come together with, the small group within Daphne, but prayerfully we're setting the example that we all should, every pastor, preacher, teacher, evangelist, whatever, regardless of denominations, we ought to be saying, you know what, this is wrong. This is wrong. And we're coming together to make this country better.
Yeah.
And the South is supposed to be, right here in the middle of the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't look that way.
Right. Yeah. That's and that is the struggle, because that, like Pastor Jackson said, to have two people on two completely different sides and both say that they're Christian, something's a little, something's off. And so just that there's too much of what I call culturalized Christianity, where we put the American before the Christian instead of the Christian before the American.
I mean, I'm not trying to put ourselves out there that way. You understand?
Right. No, these are things we have to examine. No, I completely agree. And those are things of self-examination for me as well. But to look at these things honestly, and to say, okay, maybe we've got, maybe there's an issue of the tearing down, but what should we do with those monuments? And how do we get it to a place where we can remove offense for the sake of someone else, and how do we treat that? How do we handle that? And those are the kinds of things we should keep asking. But like all of you have said it in one way or another tonight, those are surfacey things. There's deeper things to take care of. But I will say this, doing that surfacey thing unleashes those underlying emotions in people, and that's the spirit you then have to deal with, and that removal of Confederate monuments and the changing and getting rid of the Confederate flag on state flags and things like that also unleashes a spirit that gets revealed, because you're tearing down, so to speak, an idol, and that tears at a deeper motivation, and it gets revealed that way, and so that surfacey thing may be a surfacey thing, and we have to deal with some other things, but that surfacey thing getting such a visceral reaction is an indicator, that something else is going on here, and we should be paying attention to that. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Dan, I have a question, and since Matt's here with us, he might be able to help with this.
Sure.
I think in the state of Alabama, there's a law against removing statues or monuments. So what? I mean, this is for everyone, really. What is your feeling towards states controlling whether someone, say a municipality votes to remove a monument, but the state says you can't do it. And it actually doesn't belong to the state, it belongs to that community or whoever put it there. I mean, what are your feelings on that the state can control whether this...
Is that something that's in the Constitution, or it's just a state law?
No, that was just a law passed
it's a state law.
Years ago. It has not even been that long. I think Matt will know that, maybe a couple
It was passed in 2017. Yeah. And what that law says is it's a $25,000 fine to obstruct a view or to remove a statue.
Okay. No matter who removes it?
No matter who, if the city is responsible for it. Basically, like if it's in a municipality, the city is responsible for the protection of that monument to that respect.
So if the city removes it, do they have to pay a fine?
The city removes it, they have to pay a fine of $25,000. The Supreme Court just focused on this issue, and they determined that it is a one-time fine, meaning it's not $25,000 per day, or it's just a blanket check, one $25,000 fine. Mm-hmm. That's what happened with Birmingham, and Birmingham decided, you know what, we're going to pay that $25,000 to take this monument down.
Okay.
There is a push in the legislature. I'll tell you, there's a push to have that law amended in this upcoming session, which will be probably February of 2021, to amend that to remove that fine and to, I think as Clyde mentioned, you give more local control to the people that are there. I can tell you the number of times I've been in Birmingham. I'm not from Birmingham, but I lived there for a few years. I can't tell you where that park is. I couldn't tell you where that monument is. So it doesn't have the same effect on me, but there are people in Birmingham that could tell you exactly every inch of that park. And they know where that monument is. If those people, if the people that know that can say, we don't want this here, I have a problem with Montgomery telling someone, no, you're going to have to put it there.
There you go. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And so, I am much more of a local control issue. Let's let the cities and the counties have a say so into what they put in their own cities and counties, as opposed to a blanket one size fits all mandate coming from Montgomery.
That's good. How about is there any movement on the separation of the holidays, Robert E. Lee and Martin Luther King?
There's movement on that. I'm part of a committee that's working on some stuff that I think it's, there's some ideas going around right now that are going to be really good. And I talked with Clyde and mentioned this, to take out Robert E. Lee as an option. You leave it MLK Day. You take away Jefferson Davis's birth. He's not even from here, and the state where he's from doesn't celebrate his birthday. Yeah. So why Alabama is celebrating his birthday? I don't get it.
Right. Yeah.
You have to consider the employees, the state employees. You're taking a holiday away from them. So instead of taking a holiday away from them, one of the options that I've pitched is more of a voting rights day, where you give the first Tuesday in November as a state holiday. You recognize the voting rights that everybody has the opportunity to do. So you take Jefferson Davis's birthday away from there. You create that holiday. You continue that holiday, but just move it over to November. Again, the first Tuesday in November, and allow that to be a state holiday from there.
Well, if we can do anything to help you push that through, you let us know.
That's a great idea.
I love a voting day as a holiday.
Perfect idea. Oh, I love that, Matt.
And we're working on it. Like I said, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah.
Nothing in Montgomery is easy. Nothing is going to come through. You're going to have people complain, and you're going to have people get upset about it. But what I'm trying to do and is listen.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's not. People don't talk to each other anymore. People talk at each other, and they want to get their score. They want to score points in the conversation, and they don't want to listen to all sides of the conversation. And, if you walk away from the conversation thinking, "Well, I really just told him," it makes you feel good in that time, but it's not accomplishing anything. It's not reaching a common ground. It's not beneficial for anybody except for you for that 5-second period that you feel good about yourself for telling somebody off.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I'm pushing, is to try to listen more, try to be involved in things that I've never been involved in. Get out of your comfort zone of, you want to talk about it's not just about Confederate monuments. I know this issue is we're talking about Confederate monuments.
Yeah, I hear you.
But it's about more than that. It's about listening to different views. It's about bringing people to your table that have never been brought to your table before. As far as, inviting families over for dinner that may not look like you, inviting churches that may not look like you, to go and just see what's going on. And the more our country right now has been so divided, and we're separated by where we live more so than any time that I can remember. I'm not terribly old. I like to consider myself young, but at the same point, you have states and you have cities where people of one party all live in the same area with people of the same party. And you don't have that discussion, that back and forth of, okay, let me understand where you are. Let me understand what you think. Let me understand your reasons and your rationale from what you come from. And we need to work on that. We need to get better at that. We need to have these discussions and listen to, instead of just calling names and saying, oh, that guy's an idiot, listen to what he had to say, just sitting down and saying, okay, teach me. There's nothing wrong with learning. We've gotten to a point now where people are saying, well, look what you did, and look what you did 30 years ago and how you behaved 30 years ago, and you should be held accountable for what happened 30 years ago. And there's a place for that. Understand that there's a place for that, but there's also a chance to say, look how far you've grown in 30 years that you no longer feel that way. You've learned, and learning has been kind of a bad word anymore. For someone to say, hey, I didn't know that at that time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's frowned upon.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. And Matt, this is my first time getting to meet you, but you're certainly being the part of a representative tonight, and I really appreciate that. Just to listen to what folks are saying, I really appreciate that. That's incredibly impressive because there are too many times it doesn't happen anymore.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah. So it's been an hour. I don't want to press on anyone's time, but if anybody had anything that they wanted to make sure they got in, I don't want to bump anybody or anything, but I also want to honor time. And I really appreciate all of you with your perspectives. And I hope to let this be an example of actually people can talk to each other and listen to each other. And it's okay to have questions. And I hope that could be a model that we could continue to represent. And the other thing I will say is one of the things that I think that might be good, maybe not moving away from monuments, but I think of Brian Stevenson and what he's doing with the memorial up in Montgomery and the Legacy Museum is to utilize art in a way that teaches and tells a more full story. And I think there are places still where those things can happen. I will say that a couple of years ago now, we went out to New Orleans, past New Orleans on the Mississippi, and visited one of those old sugar plantations.
Same place I think Clyde and I went. I'm
sorry?
I think that you may be talking about the same place where we did a trip out there.
Yeah, and I will say that in the way that they have, they utilize that now. When I walked onto those grounds, I was on sacred ground. There was this sense of a price that had been paid that I could feel spiritually, and I'm glad for that space for that to happen. So I would say that, again, there are reasons for putting up something, and if we get to some of those things in a place like Brian Stevenson has created that space in Montgomery and other places where we can remember more accurately, I think there is a place, like Dan referred to some of those biblical things. They come out of across the Jordan, they set up those stones. And that way, when they pass that in future generations, they could tell their kids that story. And I think there's a place. And I think it's that we just, like Matt was saying, just listen to each other. And let's dream new dreams about how to tell the story and how to hear each other and how to memorialize that and honor that. And to understand, there's a place of hurt and there's a place of deep pain. And if we can remove an obstacle to get rid of that pain, it's worth doing. And so we need to work all of that out. Pastor Jackson, any thoughts?
I'm just glad to be a part of it. Prayerfully, that's something that I've said. I really enjoy listening to everyone else. And I don't know if any of you all have been to Washington to the African American Museum, and if you
need to get there, I need to get there.
You need to go.
Yeah.
And I concur when you speak of monuments in their proper places, where it can tell the true history and the true story of what happened.
Yeah.
And not just be out there as an emblem of superiority, but say, okay, this person, this is what they represented. This is what they did. This is where they tell the true story. Tell all of it.
Tell all of it.
Yeah. And when you go to Washington, it starts, and I know we're closing. It starts at the bottom level. What was it, like 6 tiers, Clyde? 5 or 6 levels?
And you start at the bottom and work up?
And you go up.
Oh, wow.
It starts with the slave ships, slavery coming, and each level just goes up in a different part of the history. It's truly amazing. But if you go there, it would truly change your view of the true history of from an African American standpoint, as well as from the country standpoint.
You can't see it all in one day.
No, you can't.
Right.
You can't. You're absolutely right. You cannot.
That's good. Well, again, thank you all. Matt, again, thank you for jumping on and listening and jumping in. So appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime you guys, if y'all will put me on your email list, I'd love to stay updated with when you guys
Clyde
will
will pass that along to Dan Hansen, and you will have more emails than you know what to do with.
Thank you, Dan, for putting it together.
All right. Thank you. I sure appreciate it. We'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Good night.